I went to Disney in 2001 and spent 12 years at Disney, including 4 years as president of Disney Store Worldwide. So we had stores in 13 countries, including Canada, and traveled around the world creating, experiential retail, but also focusing on digital retail because we had to, and, we had to be in the .com world. And then became CEO of Claire's stores, the girls' jewelry and accessory stores. So moved to Chicago for that. And had done that for about 3 years when I got called back to the West Coast, to Hollywood, Los Angeles, to become the president of consumer products and experiences at DreamWorks. And then DreamWorks got bought by NBC Universal. Then I went to 20th Century Fox, and in an odd, out of your control situation, Disney bought 20th Century Fox.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people that are watching us from around the world, they say, okay, we know where Canada is. And in British Columbia, on the West Coast, right? Right. And then British Columbia has this big city called Vancouver. Well, Prince George is 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers for our friends in Europe. And it is paradise here for nature. We have lots of forest. We have lots of nature, animals, black bears, grizzly bears, moose, caribou, deer, you name it, we have it all here in living in harmony. And then the other part about it is that it is wintertime here, and as I told you earlier, our temperature last night was 32 below 0 Celsius. And so a little bit on the nippy side, we say, but again, that is part of living in the northern part of Canada. So we have a special guest today. His name is Jim Fielding. He is an entrepreneur extraordinaire. Jim is a respected leader in experiential retail, and we'll find out what that means. Brand management, another very interesting topic, and media development. We like that one. With over 15 years of experience as a president and CEO level, he has emerged as a prominent voice in authentic leadership and DEI following the releases of the highest selling book, All Pride, No Ego, in 2023. And we'll talk about his book as well. Jim, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, John, thank you so much for having me. And I wish I could be there, but not on a day where you were minus 32. So I'm glad we're doing this virtually. I'd love to see it in the spring or summer. Maybe I'll put it on my list.
Now, if you look behind me, as you do, you see my windows. The blue is beautiful blue. The sun is bright, but it is, to say the least, cool.
Yes, so I see the people. Very few people on the street, and the ones I see are bundled. So
you got to be.
I don't need any more hint. Yeah.
Now, for all those people watching us, Jim is, as I said already, in Atlanta, Georgia. So, and they had, oh my God, they had a little bit of snow.
We did. It shut us down. Yeah. I don't even own a snow shovel, John. Like I grew up in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and I know how to shovel snow and snow blow, but in Atlanta, we don't get snow. And so for 3 days, we just let it fall and then we let it melt. But I don't even have a snow shovel. It's so funny.
I've talked to several friends, in podcasting in the last couple of weeks, and a lot of them are as well from the United States and in the South, in particular, Florida, Texas, blah, 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 all those places, and said, oh my God, we had snow. Oh my God. So Jim,
we're not used to it.
Tell us about you and your background, maybe first to share with our friends
Sure.
from around the world, and then you have this unique niche that you developed in experimental retail. You have
Hmm.
shown it and talked about it in a lot of settings. Being a
Hmm.
speaker about it, wrote a book about it, and so
Hmm.
tell us all about you, your background, and then how did it bring you where you are today?
Sure. Well, as I said, I grew up in the middle of the country, Ohio. I went to school at Indiana University, and I was a political science major, John. I thought I was going to be an international lawyer. That was my path. And at the end of undergrad, realized I was a little tired and a little lacking on funds. And so my parents said, it's probably best for you to go out and work for a couple of years and then go back to law school. And I ended up going into a retail training program at a department store and found a love for that industry. So I started out in retail and particularly physical retail, experiential retail, experimental retail. Like I really am about, as much as I love digital retail and e-commerce and social selling, I really am about the store experience. I mean, that really has been my entire career. And spent some incredible years at the Gap in the heydays of the Gap, running stores in the Midwest and then living in San Francisco. And then the second half of my career is really when I got into media and entertainment. I went to Disney in 2001 and spent 12 years at Disney, including 4 years as president of Disney Store worldwide. So we had stores in 13 countries, including Canada, and traveled around the world creating, experiential retail, but also focusing on digital retail because we had to, and we had to be in the .com world. And then became CEO of Claire's stores, the girls' jewelry and accessory stores. So moved to Chicago for that, and had done that for about 3 years when I got called back to the West Coast to Hollywood, Los Angeles, to become the president of consumer products and experiences at DreamWorks, and then DreamWorks got bought by NBC Universal. Then I went to 20th Century Fox, and in an odd, out of your control situation, Disney bought 20th Century Fox. So right before the pandemic, I was out of a role for the first time in my life. I was laid off, got a severance package, uh, announced to the world I was going to take a sabbatical and that I'd be back in April of 2020, to look for my next corporate opportunity. And of course, it was the pandemic. So there weren't corporate opportunities. People weren't hiring. If they were hiring, it was part time or remote. And that's when I made the pivot to where I am today, where I started consulting, running my own business, joined a small media company in New York called Archer Gray, but ran my consulting business really through Archer Gray until August of last year, 2024. Because what happened, as you kindly mentioned, I put a book out in August of 2023. It worked, it hit the bestseller list. That opened up a tremendous amount of doors that I never anticipated. Speaking, uh, the book tour, writing more books. And I made the decision in early 2024 that I was going to stop really the consulting business and only focus on speaking and writing. And I went back to school here in Atlanta at Emory University to get my certificates in coaching. So I'm also coaching people now. For the last 6 or 7 months, it's been me waking up in the morning and either speaking or getting ready to speak, writing, or coaching. So, really, for the first time, I started working when I was 13. I mean, my parents sent me out in the work world when I was 13. So, um, it was really the first time in 46 years that I'm now 100% on my own and really, really enjoying it and getting opportunity to meet people like you and do podcasts and um, just learning so much. I mean, it's crazy.
So what comes to mind when I see you, Jim, is that you are a very good, I'm not trying to make you feel good, I'm simply making an
Sure.
observation, sharing that with you, that you are a very good communicator. And
Mm,
I'm also doing what you're doing is I'm a
mhm.
presenter or a speaker in demand speaker. I'm an author. I'm working on my fifth and sixth book, and
Amazing.
but actually the fifth one that I'm working on deals directly with effective communication and how critical it
Mm,
is. And what I'm
mm,
suggesting is, and I want to bounce that by you, is that I believe to become successful either in entrepreneurship or in business or become an effective leader, you must be a good communicator to
mm.
excel to that above level. And that doesn't mean being a good speaker, but also become a good listener, first and foremost,
Yes.
and to be having the ability to coordinate communication on your feet and articulate responses careful
Mm,
and precisely. Those are all part of the elements you require to become, and I say you in a general sense, in order for you to not only become good at what you're doing in management, but to go beyond that. And that applies to
mhm,
being an author, obviously a presenter, but it also
mhm,
applies to what I call the new amazing media podcaster, and which is
mm.
only at its infancy as we speak, and has huge potential as we go forward.
Huge. Huge. No, I can't wait to read that book, by the way. And no, I 1000% agree. I mean, and I worked at it. I mean, I think you learn how to be a good communicator. I think some people are natural communicators. I think some people are born with it. Um, I I think I have some genetic predisposition. My dad was a mayor, and so he was a very good communicator. I grew up around a good communicator, uh, but I've learned it over time. And I think your point is so important that it's not just about the speaking, it's about the listening and the active listening. And I think the skills that I've learned over time is how to communicate one on one with people, how to communicate in small groups, how to communicate in large groups, and that you tailor your methods and your message to the size of the group and what you're talking about. And I think I have a unique ability to read a room, to your point, and know, and from what you do, John, you can tell when your message is landing or not landing, um, when you're speaking or in person or speaking virtually. I do a lot of virtual now at one time. And I think it is absolutely the key to my success. And honestly, when I became a CEO, when I left Disney to become a CEO. One of my last meetings was with Bob Iger, who was the CEO of Disney, and he literally said the two most important jobs of a CEO is communication, setting a vision, and communicating that vision. Like that was what he felt the CEO's role was, and he's absolutely
I agree 100%. And then the other part about it, Jim, is that in order to achieve that, you have to have confidence in who are you.
right.
And then
Mm,
and then the other part is that for me that was a bit of a struggle to get to that point. Who am I? And so
mm,
and so in order to put that into perspective, I just give you a little bit of background about me. Uh, I just turned 84 years young 2 weeks ago, and November the 1st.
amazing.
And I was born in Holland, in the northeastern part of Holland. in 1940. And as we all know, that was just before Holland was invaded, really, by the German dictator Adolf Hitler, who had invaded Poland and then decided to take on Western Europe. And so my mom and dad were married in 1938. They were in love. They had rented a beautiful little house, and my dad had a career in the forest industry, working as an accountant, and paradise was ahead of them. And then everything changed. They very quickly had two kids, a boy and a girl, and then in April 1940, my dad was called into the Dutch army that was defending Holland. And the last time that they saw him was just before the bombing of Rotterdam. And so thousands of people died. And so for 5 years, they wouldn't know if he lived or died. And my mom was on her own with two new kids, and then pregnant with me. I would be born November the 1st, 1940. And it was a very, very difficult time for her, obviously. And everything changed overnight. And so the first thing that I remember, I was 3.5, 4 years old, is bombers overhead from the Allied forces that were bombing the northwestern part of Holland, of Germany, close to the North Sea. We were about 10 or 15 minutes from the border, and at nights we would go to the flat roof behind our house, and we would watch there as the bombers came over. I can still hear the sound, hundreds of them. And so in the distance we could see the sky being red from all the bombing of places like Bremen, Wilhelmshaven, Hamburg, and all those places. And the reason that we were outside, my mother felt safer outside than inside. I remember that part. And then the next thing that I remember is 2004, when the Germans cut off all the food supply to our region. And so I still have the feeling of hunger. And every morning we would go as kids over with gunny sacks into the railroad yard, pick up anything edible and burnable. And the reason that we did as kids, because they wouldn't shoot us, they put us one, but we were back the following day. And then the next thing that changed my life was that we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. We saw far too much as the Allied forces, the U.S. Army in particular, and the Canadians and other forces landed on Normandy on June of 1944, and they pushed their way through France, the Canadians did, and through Belgium, through the west side of Holland, and they pushed towards the north where we lived, 10 or 15 minutes from the border. Things got pretty rough and pretty tough. We saw far too much that we should not have seen. And so the Canadians came in April the 12th, 1945. I still remember a small section of the Canadian Army was within a block behind our house, and every morning we would go down there and they feed us with bread, and the butter and the cheese was bigger than the bread, and everybody we didn't speak English, but everybody was called Johnny, and we didn't speak the language, but we did, really. And so it made such an impression on me that I knew when I grew up I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so it always stayed with me. I was going to go when I was 17. My parents wouldn't let me then. I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force, and then I finally went when I was 23. And so, didn't speak the language, didn't know anybody, didn't have a job, and academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times, and they said, what are we going to do with this guy? They said, well, send him to the mentally challenged school. He said, no, we're not going to do that. So at 12 and a half years old, they got me a job in a furniture factory, And
Mm.
and that's kind of where I worked until I went into the Air Force. And then after I came out of that, I went to Canada. But talking about communication, when I grew up in northeastern Holland, we spoke dialect.
Mm.
And I love speaking dialect, but it is different. It sounds different than High Dutch. So I
Mhm.
always liked dialect. So when I was already in 18 years old, 19 years old, I had to learn to speak High Dutch. And
Mm.
then I barely got that part under control when I was 23, decided to go to Canada, started with nothing because I didn't feel good about myself, and kids can be hard
Mm.
on each other. All the kids that I went to
Mm.
school with, that went to college and to university, all kind of looked at me as I was a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then I was kind of looked down on a bit. But I knew I was just as bright as the others, but different. And I didn't know why I was different, and I felt I had to start anew right from the beginning. And
Mm.
obviously, my
Mm.
dream of going to Canada was important. And then I wanted to start with nothing. And so, because I knew that I could do it, I wanted to build a lumber mill. And in order to do that, I had to go to
Mm.
Western Canada and in British Columbia, because that's where all the timber is. And so I took a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money, flew into Montreal, took the train across Canada. It took 4 days, 5 nights. Oh my God, that's a long way to go. And then landed
So big.
in Vancouver, went to the immigration office. I couldn't speak English, so fortunately there was a German fellow I could speak some German. Told them what I wanted. I want to build a lumber mill. And he said, go to Prince George, which is 500 miles north, 800 kilometers for our European friends. And that's where I came off the bus. I can still see it here, where I came off the bus 60 years ago. And I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But
Love it.
I had lots of attitude. I've always been
Mm-hmm.
positive, and even still today, and I already was when I was young. I have a passion. No matter what I do, I give it 125%, and work ethic. I work harder
Mm.
even now than anybody. Even at 84, I usually get up at 5:30. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so,
Yeah.
and I still probably work 60, 70 hours a week. And
Oh, it's amazing.
I did
It's
get a
amazing.
sawmill and then 10 other companies. And so, but what also changed my life, it was the war years, obviously, meeting the Canadians, going to Canada, starting from nothing. I still did not feel good about who am I. And already I
Mm.
was successful in my businesses. And after I was here already for 32 years in Prince George, already built businesses, I was not overly confident in the things that I did. I,
Mm.
I walked into a bookstore and I found a book. And I have the
Mm.
actual book here that I found 32 years
Mm.
ago. And the title of the book was Driven to Distraction, written
Mm.
by Dr. Halliwell. Dr.
Mm.
Halliwell is a medical doctor, written 18 books, 5 on distraction, known
Mm.
globally. The book is about ADHD. And I said,
Mm.
oh my God, that's me. And
Mm.
so I wrote, this is the actual book. And it says January 1997. I,
Wow.
Dr. Halliwell wrote this book in 1993. This book was written in 1997. And so, and I wrote in Dutch because I was ashamed of it, because it implied potentially neurodiversity or having a mental
Mm.
disorder of some sort. The stigma attached to it
Mm.
was negative. And so I wrote it in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am. And
Mm,
so that's what happened to me.
amazing. That's amazing.
Now, the other part, talking about communication, which I must share with you to put it into perspective, my experience is that already I've found this book in 1997, and just by the way,
Hmm.
for our friends watching our podcast, is Dr. Halliwell, ADHD, and has a reading challenge as well,
Mm,
dyslexia. So do I.
mm,
I interviewed Dr. Maxwell or Dr. Halliwell on my podcast number 203 on the brink.
mm.
And can you believe it? And so, and
No, that's amazing.
it was, and so the was a very interesting discussion we had. Is that I believed initially that maybe 8% of the population globally ADHD. So when we had our discussion, I found that I believe that it was much higher than that, at maybe as much as
Mm,
20%. So when I doing our
mm.
discussion on my podcast number 203, I suggested that maybe 20%. He said, no, John, it'd probably be more like 25%. I agree with them.
Wow.
The other thing that we discussed is that in all the entrepreneurs that I've met and all the businesses I've been involved with, all the boards that I've been involved in, that I believe, and I suggested, Dr. Halliwell is the expert, I just lived it. I suggested to Dr. Halliwell, from my experience, I believe that 50% of all the successful entrepreneurs are ADHD. He said, no, John,
Mm.
probably 75% of the successful ones. And
Yeah,
the key is the successful ones. That
that's
changed
so fascinating.
my
Yeah.
life. And then the other part that changed my life, just to put the conversation, communication skills into perspective, is I was not good at communications up until
Mm,
2090 when I was already successful, all kinds of business, and they said, oh, you're so successful, blah. I didn't feel that way. And so
mm.
I had somebody suggested to me, ex-sister-in-law actually, she said, in 1990, she said, why don't you go with me to Toastmasters?
Mm.
I said, Toastmasters, what is that all about? She said, it's about communications. I said,
Yes.
okay, are they going to ask me something? She said, no. I said, okay, I go. And then, interesting, halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about you. I said, I'll never go back here. But I did.
Yeah.
I stayed there for 10 years, became a distinguished Toastmaster, and that part changed my life.
See, that's I love. I mean, my God, your story is so fascinating on so many levels. But that is exactly, when people ask me, "Can you learn to be a good communicator?" Your story, 1,000%. And I love that you did Toastmasters. Dale Carnegie is another one that I tell people to do,
Exactly.
who have a fear of public speaking. Right? I think Toastmasters and Dale Carnegie are so great for people who have a fear of public speaking. And because you're so good at it, I tell people I still get nervous about public speaking. Every time I'm going on a stage, I feel those nerves, but I honestly think, John, it's the adrenaline that is coursing through your veins that actually makes you a better speaker, because it's that little bit of stage fright, that little moment of worry of, oh, am I worthy of this audience? Is my message going to land?
I
I
know.
actually think makes you work harder. And I never want to lose that. I never want to not have that little surge of adrenaline before. And it doesn't matter if I'm speaking to 5 people or 50 or 500. You need that little oomph. And
I
I
feel
love,
I feel
yeah, it's
exactly the
amazing.
same, Jim. I feel
Yeah,
exactly I do
yeah,
exactly the same, and I agree with you.
yeah,
I need that because that then will kind of excel me to where I need to be.
yeah. I think it's a little extra energy boost. And I mean, the whole time you were talking, I mean, one of my favorite phrases is, I love confidence. I abhor arrogance. And you are a perfect example of that humility, like moving through life with gratitude and humility. We all want to be confident. But I never want it to fall over into arrogance. And
Exactly.
I think that's a huge part of what I wrote about, which is, all pride, no ego. Like when the ego takes over and you start to fall over into that arrogance, I think you become a less effective leader, a less effective communicator, frankly, a less effective person. And your story, I mean, your entire life story, I was thinking the whole time, confidence, not arrogance, confidence, not arrogance. You're like such a living example of that.
I like that, Jem. Show us your book because I was going to ask you all
Look,
pride,
here it
no
is.
ego, and saying that's exactly what it is. And I agree
Mm-hmm.
with you. So that book is available on all the major.
Everywhere, everywhere. Yeah. I
Did
mean,
you do Audible?
I did Audible. It's me, and I love that because I probably get more comments about the Audible, John, than anything else. Where people be like, "I really appreciate, yes, I really appreciate you taking the time to record it." They say it feels like I'm in conversation with them. I like that. There you go.
And
I love
and
it.
and so the other one that I did, I just want to show you, is the fourth one that I did. Is this one?
I know. I see it behind you. I love that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
I love
And
that
that's a
one.
picture of me. I'm the oldest competitive
Yeah,
bodybuilder in North America.
I
Yes.
love that. See, I mean, but that's part of why you're so vital and healthy at 84. I mean, you've taken care of
84
your
years
body.
young. It's quality of life that is critical.
Completely. Yes. I turned 60 in April, and so I'm very conscious of, I think birthdays that end in zeros and fives are really big in my life. Like those are big pivot moments. Like the in between birthdays, not as much. But when they end in a zero or a five, I think it's a really interesting time to reflect. It's almost like I give myself a review, on like where am I in life, and am I happy with what I'm doing? Am I on?
That is
So I'm in
quite.
that kind of pre-birthday review period right now.
Yeah, I like that because I had not heard that before. It's something I'm going to accept from you because if I look back, is zero was important. I was born in 1940. Five when we were
Yeah,
liberated by the Canadians. 10 when I was again failing in school, and then
yeah, it's so
15,
interesting.
and
Well,
then
I was born in a 5 year. Like I was born in 65. And so I think maybe that's why I'm so obsessed with fives and zeros. It's not that I'm a numerologist,
no,
but
no, no.
I I definitely think when I look at, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, they're all pivot moments in my life. Something happened, not as dramatically as your story, but something happened to me at all of those pivot.
So I'm looking at some of the questions. How do
Yes.
companies reach and implement authentic leadership? How do they?
Well, it really starts with the leaders themselves. And I think one of the things that you talked about is you had to get in touch with yourself and learn to accept yourself and learn your confidence. And I think a culture of authenticity, a culture of authentic leadership starts with the founders of the company or the leaders of the company, right? I think they have to be in touch with themselves, self-aware of what they're good at. And if they move through life, I always say walk the walk and talk the talk, embracing their story, embracing their authenticity, that permeates throughout the culture of their company or their group that they lead, or the team that they lead. Um, and I, for me, you found the authenticity of your ADHD and your neurodivergence. I had to accept that I was LGBTQ. Like I had to accept that I was a queer man and a gay man, and I did that at 25. Ironically, when you talk about the fives and
Yeah,
zeros,
yeah.
I knew from a very young age, but I was trying not to be that because I thought it was wrong and I thought
Right.
it was different and I thought I was going to be ostracized and my family wasn't going to love me and my friends weren't going to love me. I had horrible, horrible self talk. And I finally got to the point where I was 25 and I was like, this is the way I was meant to be. I was born, this is the way I was born. And I now say that moment, I came out really at work first before I even told my family. But now I think authenticity is my superpower because I say that after 25, when I mapped my career took off because I was going into work and giving 100% of myself without any reservation, without any worry or shame or concern. And so, um, and then, I mean, when I look at my career between 25 and ironically, 55, which is when the merger happened and I lost my job, right? It's just so interesting that those 30 years, I embraced my story. I embraced my authenticity uh, and never looked back. I mean, I think it's one of those things. Once you share your truth, it's not like you can then 6 months later say, "I'm sorry, that wasn't true."
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you know what I mean? It's like you just share your truth and you move forward. And
Finally.
I was, yeah, finally. And it was like losing for me, it was like losing 180 pounds because
No question.
I had been carrying this burden around that was almost like another person.
Sure.
And I was trying to be something that I wasn't. And uh, I mean, and I really think that's why I wrote the book is the book almost, I was 56 when I wrote it, and I was almost writing to 25-year-old Jim. It's almost like I was writing to myself and saying, these are things I wish I had learned earlier. And so for any young people who are like younger in their career, regardless of their truth and their authenticity, the book is organized around life lessons that I wish I had embraced, 30 years before. It would have saved me a lot of anxiety and a lot of therapy and a lot of self doubt and insecurity.
So the other part that I see in you, Jim, is that, and what which we have in common, is that I'm a storyteller. So the
Yes.
books that I write are stories, and the same I do in presentations that I do, and then the other part, considering my lack of success in the traditional learning setting, classroom setting, I've obviously learned a lot more outside of it. And the other part that I always have been good at, even in grade 3 and grade 7, I was very good at numbers. And then the other part, obviously because of dyslexia and ADHD, I was not good at reading, but I was good at writing. And then the other part, what was unique in my case, I have, even at 84, an amazing memory. And a lot of time, people around me are amazed by my memory at this age, but it's always been part of it. And I'm a strategic thinker in terms of, and you like this one, in terms of business, because if we want to be successful, we don't only have to try to be successful today, but we have to understand where that will be 12 months from now, obviously for obvious reasons, but we have to go beyond that. What will it be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years, 20 years from now? And I believe I'm good at that part in combination of the others. And although I was not trained at university level how to do businesses,
Yeah.
I'm very good at it because most of those people, they work in a box and how
Yeah.
to manage. What I do is, and especially in those settings that makes them feel sometimes respectfully,
Hmm.
uncomfortable because I'm always outside of the box and say, why are we doing this? Why, how about this? Why not that? How about this? So,
No,
and
but but you're a fuzzy thinker. We call that fuzzy thinking, right? And you're obviously able to navigate in the gray, right? You're not only black and white. And I think that's what makes you interesting and makes you successful. And I think leadership, particularly now, John, and I coach a lot of senior executives. I think there's more challenges now than probably any time I've seen in my career, with what's going on in the world, what's going on in the marketplace, what's going on in society. And you have to be a fuzzy thinker. You have to be able to color outside the lines because the rules are all changing and technology is changing and AI and all of these things that you can't control, but you have to understand and you have to analyze and you have to decide how it impacts your team and how it impacts your business.
you see, and that then being said, Jim, in particular, as you think in terms of experiential retail and the retail development, I still
Hmm.
remember from Holland, the stores that I know are the little ones down the street that have groceries,
Yes.
they have this, that, and the other thing. And then when I came to Canada in particular, but also to a certain extent in Holland, all of a sudden you got those shopping centers of the different stores being in their different locations.
Hmm.
And then as
Hmm.
that kind of evolved, they became bigger in some cases, and all of a sudden the little ones didn't fit anymore unless
Suffered.
they
Yeah.
created specialties. And then
Hmm.
the next thing that happened is called Amazon. And
Yeah.
so,
Ecom.
and all of a sudden that changed everything. And so, and now the amazing part about it is that, again, going back to physical shopping, touching, feeling, is starting to, in my opinion, is starting to come back
Mm.
somewhat in special areas. But at the same time, I see smaller stores that did not succeed because they got stuck in a model that doesn't work anymore.
Hmm.
But some of them are successful because they are
Hmm.
different. And then at the same
Hmm.
time, as we already know, with all the things that are happening right now as we speak, with trade
Mm.
issues,
Yes.
China,
Tariff.
and all the
Tariff.
other things, again, will dramatically change because once you start the motion of trade,
Mm.
duties, tariffs, on, it's going to change everything. And
Hmm.
so that's where we are today. And as we watch,
Hmm.
I watch a lot of CNN and all the other kind of things, obviously, in Atlanta. And so we are
Yeah.
amazingly, as Canadians and Americans, we are very close together. We were in Normandy in June of 1944
Hmm.
when we liberated then Europe, and I was on the
Hmm.
other side. The other place that we were very, very close together when we rebuilt together, and especially the United States, the Marshall Plan, rebuilding
Yes.
Europe, and then from there on,
Yes.
then obviously the beacon of light in the United States attracted a lot of Europeans with the fear of Russia coming in that emigrated
Hmm.
to the United States and became what they are now, a mosaic of different people from all over the world. But the United States, very, very
Hmm.
powerful in the world, but it is changing as we speak.
It is. It is. And I mean, I think the way you just summarized that so beautifully is exactly what I'm talking about with my coaching clients, right? That's what they're facing. If they're leading a team or a company or a group right now, I mean, that is 1,000% what they're facing. Um, Again, the competition in the marketplace, the advancement of technology, the growth of Amazon, the impact of artificial intelligence. And as a leader, you have to be adaptable. You have to be flexible, and you have to listen to the news and read and listen to smart people like you, and then say, okay, how do I interpret this for my company? What does this mean for me? What do tariffs mean for me? What does artificial intelligence mean for what I do? And I think that's a lot of what I spend coaching time on, is
And
helping leaders sort through that and make some decisions.
and that's the unique set of knowledge you have developed over all these years, 30, 40 years,
Hmm.
and doing this on the ground where you've acquired the skill sets that you require to look
Hmm.
forward as to what will it look like
Hmm.
as we go forward and what should we do. Because a lot of times now, what has become normal in business, a lot of times business people are reluctant to look forward and potentially experiment with where do we go from here and where do we acquire the knowledge, and to find people
Hmm.
like you and myself that look forward in the future and say,
Hmm.
what will it look like and why is it
Yeah,
different, is critically important at this particular
it
point
is.
in
It
time, more so
is.
than ever.
It ever. Well, and I think a skill that I'm listening to you, I think a skill or trait that we both share is not only that we look forward, we're actually able to synthesize information. Like, and I've been told that, right? So we're able to take seemingly disparate news and disparate trends, and to your point, what's going on in the government, what's going on with tariffs, what's going on in technology, what's going on in consumer behavior, and I'm blessed that I'm able to synthesize that information. I'm able to kind of put that all into my head, shake it around a little bit, and then turn it into an action plan. And not everybody has that same skill. And in fact, I was told when I had a coach in my career, I think that's why I love coaching so much. Jim, you synthesize information much faster than the average person. You've got to let the team catch up with you, because you're actually stressing them out because they're not getting there as fast as you will. They'll get there, but you have to let them get there. So, yes, you continue to do it. You continue to be the leader that you are, but you've got to let the people around you process information at their own rate. And that was a huge gift that my coach gave me, was that self-awareness again, that, okay, even though I've synthesized the information, not everybody on my team has yet, and I can't push them to do it faster because everybody does it at a different rate.
But the other part about it, Jim, me looking at you and your bio, is that the foundation for what you present today goes back 40 years.
Oh,
So when you
for
went through
sure.
all the ups and downs, including who am I, that took you
Yes.
time to reconcile when you were
All the
25,
scars, all
all
the
of
all the
that.
scars. Yeah,
But then without that, you would not be who you are today.
100%. No, and and it goes back even before I was born. It goes back, and you mentioned that it goes into your family. Like, when I look at how I was raised, and my parents and my grandparents, my dad was a fireman. He was a fireman, and then he retired from fireman and went into politics. We were a family of readers, John. Like, I remember, I think some of my first gifts were books. And we would sit, I was blessed to grow up with both sets of grandparents living very close by. I would see them at least once a week, at least on Sundays. We'd always get together on Sundays. But the conversation around the table, even from a very young age, was about what books we were reading, or what was going on in politics or local politics, or what was going on in science. Like, of course, we were having family chatter and people were talking about who was getting married and who was having babies and all that kind of stuff. But we would literally go around the table, and both of my grandfathers were incredible storytellers. But they would challenge me and say, what book are you reading? Tell me, almost like do little book reports, right? And it wasn't even like homework. It was just such a natural part of my existence that in both my sister and myself, my parents and my grandparents instilled a love of reading, a love of learning. And my sister and I both still are voracious readers. I'm a physical book reader. Even though I did my own audiobook, I'm not really an audiobook listener. I'm really like the physicalness of books. And it's one of the things I love about back to physical, experiential, experimental retail is I love bookstores. I love old bookstores. I love those tiny little, to your point, mom and pop bookstores that some person or some family or some owner has curated a selection of books because obviously they can't carry every book that's ever been made. Um, Particularly when I go to Europe, when I go to London, I love the antique bookstores and just the way they smell and the way they feel. And I think it's because my first gifts were books. Like I just was given this tremendous love of reading. And so to write my own book, and I'm sure you went through this with your first one, the fact the fact that I could even write a book and the fact that then somebody wanted to publish that book and then the fact that somebody bought the book, like I literally feel every time someone buys a book or downloads that audiobook, it's such a sense of gratitude because I know that people are very busy and that money is precious. And so, I mean, the highlight of the last couple of years since the book came out, the last 18 months, is when you meet somebody on the book tour or you get a message from somebody on LinkedIn, Instagram, or wherever, and they say, I read your book and it meant so much to me, and this is why. Like that is a gift. I mean, so to me, the book is a gift that just keeps on giving, right? And I don't even care how many it sells. I'm not hung up on numbers. I'm not hung up on bestseller lists. Like it's more about the moments when you interact with somebody who read it, and it's more about the community.
I agree, Jim. And if I look back, like even, failing grade 7 3 times and then becoming
Yeah.
laborer, I always had this hunger for watching books. I would go into bookstores, pick up books, look at it, read it, bits and pieces of it. And then the other part that I did is I went out of my way listening to programs on the radio again about politics and business, and then went
Yes.
all over the place listening to successful business people and trying to figure
Yes.
out what made them click, how did they get to where they
Yes.
are.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
Well, yeah, and with your dyslexia, the listening was probably much easier and less frustrating.
exactly. And then the
Yeah.
other part is, and I hope you ask me this question, is that
Yeah.
when I came to Canada, I had my suitcase. I had 3 books, two sets of
Yes.
clothes, and very little money. The 3 books that I took,
Yeah, I was going to ask. Yes.
so it was the Management by Drucker and Dutch,
Ah,
and so I
Peter
still have
Drucker. Oh
them.
my God.
The second
Oh my
one was
God.
Logical Thinking, and I still
Mm,
have that. The third one was about Canada. And so, but always that foundation was there. What makes businesses click? Politics, how do they interact? How does it all fit together? And how can you see where it is today, where it was, but even more importantly, where are we going and where potentially are the opportunities?
for sure. For sure. And I think it's all this golden thread that, has carried you through all these years and all these experiences. And I feel that same thing, as I get ready to do another zero birthday. I just feel this golden thread of, this respect for learning, this constant curiosity. I can tell you're the same as I am. I'm just curious. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I read and I listen because I'm like, that's interesting. Like, and I love, we have NPR, National Public Radio here in the United States. It's my favorite thing to listen to. I listen to it at home. I listen to it in the car. I listen to it on drives because you hear stories on there that you wouldn't necessarily hear anywhere else, right? And you learn about, like, I remember when I learned about the plight of honeybees, because we have a honeybee crisis in the United States. That was on NPR. I would have never known about the honeybee crisis without it and what that meant to our ecosystem and what it meant to the environment. Um, I think, unfortunately, the conflicts we've had around the world, like I've learned about them on NPR because I think that they present it from a very balanced perspective of and a very human perspective of what the impacts are of these conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine and in Africa. I mean, and I think I'm just curious and I love meeting new people. It's why I love doing podcasts. Like I I would have never met you if I didn't do this, right? And I also believe that everything happens for a reason in this life and that I'm was supposed to do this with you and supposed to be here right now. And I tell young people that all the time. Like never take for granted the present moment that you're in. Do not take for
Exactly.
granted uh, because you're where you're supposed to be. And it's a great feeling. I love that feeling.
So the other part that I find amazing, Jim, and so are you, is that about 6, 7, 8 years ago, I started blogging interactively, and then gradually went to the next stage is doing some interaction on local television with individuals that then kind of graduated into
I
next we
love it.
have COVID. And we couldn't do that anymore. So then we said, what do we do now? And then I had this apartment that I'm sitting in today as an investment. And she said, well, maybe what we should do is do our own thing in our own setting. So we did that, mainly having 2 couches here and local physical people. And then that went well. And then we said, we have to expand it. How we do that? How do we bring more people in? And so we connected with Potmatch, and then from there on in, all of a sudden we became, over the last 2.5 years, very, very active. As I said, we have done
Yeah.
373 podcasts,
73. I know. That's
hosting,
a great
and probably
number.
200 where I'm a guest as well. And then, and then we are not bragging about that on YouTube. We are approaching 1 million subscribers. We are at 730 or so, and so I find it an amazing media because, as you already said, there you are in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm sitting in Prince George, British Columbia. We've
Yeah.
developed this relationship which will last forever in my
Forever
world and
now.
in
Yeah.
yours. And,
Yeah.
and so develop this relationship. I'm going to send you all my books, all 4 of them.
Oh
I'm going
my
to sign them
gosh.
and send them to you.
And I'm going to send one to you. Yep. I got to write that down. I've been taking notes the whole time.
And so the interesting part I was going to show you, I don't know if you can see, I'm going to send them to you. Can you see what it says on the back and how much it cost?
No. Fuzzy.
25.47.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, not
That
you,
is so
obviously. I'm going to send it
clever.
to you, but all my books are 25.47.
2547 Canadian.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'll
So
Venmo. I'll Venmo you.
yeah. So anyway, I'm sending you these all free. Obviously, I was just going to
Oh my
show you.
God. Thank
Yeah. So
you.
I'm signing them,
That's so
and
sweet.
Scott will get your address. But the
And I'll
amazing
send you
part
mine too.
with podcasting, we're podcasting around the globe. Amazing what a vehicle, and it's just still at its infancy. It's the new
Oh
media
gosh.
with
Yes.
huge potential, and obviously we have done a lot of podcasts. I'm planning to, in the next 3, 4 months, to set up a platform speaking about issues that are important in my life and hope in others, but it has huge,
Teach us.
huge
Teach
potential.
us. Yes. Teach us. Share your wisdom. Share your wisdom. Well, I'm planning on launching a podcast in May or June this year. So I will put you on my list. I hope I get to 373 episodes. That would be unbelievable. But
I'm sure
I
you
and
will.
I'm I'm excited about it because everything you're talking about, it's storytelling and it's connection and I just think there's so many interesting people that I know already, and then people that I'm meeting all the time that the world needs to know.
But you have all the background, the knowledge, the
Mm,
interesting things that you have done, where you are, and as you go forward to make you a perfect podcaster,
mm,
in my opinion.
thank
And it
you.
certainly
Thank
was
you.
my privilege to have you on my
Oh,
podcast. And for
my
all those
favorite. This is
people
the
watching
best.
us, subscribe to us, share it with others, like it, and comment on it. Jim, it
For
was a
sure.
pleasure and a privilege.
My pleasure. Stay warm
I will.
and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.
Thank, thank you.